So, your favorite artist dropped a bad album, huh? It's okay. It happens to the best of them. I mean, if you've already accepted it, then you're on the last stages of this album grieving process. But how do you support a bad release from an artist that you love? What's up, everybody? My name is Mo, your friendly neighborhood music head. And it's been a while since my last video, but today I'm going to be hitting you with a topic that has kind of been rattling my brain for a while. And that is, what do you do when your favorite artist drops a bad project? I mean, it happens to more music fans than people would really like to admit, but, just walk with me here on this topic, alright? Now, you probably listen to a lot of music and consider yourself a fan of a lot of different artists, but naturally, everybody has their favorites. You might have an emotional connection with an artist or two. You might have an album or song that got you through some pivotal moments in life. You might have some memories that get triggered when you listen to certain songs and albums. Or it's not that deep, and somebody just makes some dope music that you ride to. So said artist announces an album. They go through the whole rollout process, they do a couple interviews, they put out some singles, and after a few weeks, boom, they drop their new album. The problem is, you don't like it. Now, no artist is exempt from this happening. And there's a difference between just not liking or connecting with an album and that project simply just being bad. But at the end of the day, in either one of those cases, you're just not trying to listen to it. And that can really suck as a fan. That process of you figuring out you don't like an album, I kind of consider it like the 5 stages of grief. Like, you don't necessarily experience all 5 of the stages, or even in order, but the logic still really does apply. The first stage is denial, and I have certainly experienced denial when it comes to albums. Vividly, I remember Schoolboy Q's album, Crash Talk. I didn't want to admit that that whole project was really mediocre to me. I won't even say that it's a really bad album. A lot of people try to push that narrative, but especially when I was coming off of really falling in love with Blank Face LP, I remember kind of expecting that same essence, that same feeling he had in those tracks. And it was a really big disappointment for me. And I was in denial that it was that bad, that I didn't like it. I remember vividly the 2 songs that came out, Num Num Juice and Chopsticks. I pretended like Num Num Juice was the actual single, the only single, because Chopsticks was so awful, I denied its existence. It happens. The next stage is anger, and the best example that I can use is Chance the Rapper's album, The Big Day. We all expected that to be, tolerable, but it wasn't. You follow up 10 Day and Coloring Book, or 10 Day Acid Rap and Coloring Book with Hot Damn, Hot Water, Hot Shower. I was angry, in all seriousness. The same thing happened to me with Justin Timberlake's album, A Man in the Woods. I remember, I was in love with Future Sex Love Sounds. I still really, really love 2020 Experience Part 1 and 2. So to follow that up with A Man in the Woods, singing about flannel and giving it to his wife for her to sniff his scent, and it was bad. And I was very, very angry when that happened. It's all a part of that process of realizing it's not good. Then there's bargaining, trying to figure out a reason as to why these things are happening. I did it with Tanesha's album Joyride. I was Googling, trying to figure out, she was on the outs with her label deal and this was her last album, so she was just throwing songs together. I was trying to figure out this grand scheme as to why this album wasn't connecting with me. Depression is, of course, part of this process. I mean, to a very lesser extent, I wouldn't say that I was bedridden, but Tyler, the Creator's album, Flower Boy, it wasn't for me. I've tried many times, I'm a huge Tyler fan, but as much as that album has taken him and his sound, I wasn't really connecting with it. And as a big Tyler fan, I mean, he drops bi-yearly, and waiting around for this album to come out finally comes, and I'm just, by it. It's hard to even put it into words. It just sucked. And there's a certain level of depression or sadness that comes with it. It's temporary, but it happens. But the most important stage, number 5, is acceptance. But what do you do then? You've accepted that you don't like the album, but how do you go on trying to support your favorite artist and their new project when you're not even really trying to listen to it? Speaking from my own experience, here's some tips on just how to navigate the situation. Tip number 1, stream their old work. Obviously, streaming revenue isn't very lucrative for artists, but streaming data is. And if you're not necessarily feeling the new album, if you're not trying to listen to it frequently, the least you can do if you really still want to support them is stream the old stuff. If they're not going to get your streaming numbers for this new project, at least support the previous stuff and add on to that data that helps this artist grow. Tip number 2, which is probably the most important tip that I'm going to share now that I think about it, share constructive criticism. There is nothing worse than somebody who isn't going to keep it real with you when you need it the most. That statement probably applies to many facets in life, but especially with music. There are still fans out there who acknowledge Speeding Bullet to Heaven by Kid Cudi as a tolerable experience, even though Cudi himself has admitted that he had a bit of a misstep there, to put it lightly. Admitting when an artist's music isn't working is important because it can help them grow. However, there is a major difference between constructive criticism and simply hating. I mean, put yourself in the position of the artist. You've spent probably months, maybe even years, putting together this body of work. You've worked with mixers, producers, writers, publicists, been interviewed. You've worked with so many different people trying to get this thing together. You put it out. How do you think this artist is going to respond when you're scrolling through and you see, man, that shit is trash? You don't know what it took for them to get there. You don't know what this project means to them. If you're leading with the negative energy, what do you think the outcome is going to be? What's different is if you give feedback constructively. So you say things like, hypothetically, oh, wasn't really feeling the club records on this, but I really like when you get introspective on tracks 9 and 10. You know, you're giving them something, but not necessarily overpraising. You say, oh, I was feeling that top half of the project, but not so much the bottom half. You're not just criticizing, but you're not exactly overpraising either. You kind of hover in the middle line. You give enough of what you really feel. That's really just how you do it. Artists are sensitive about their work. You treat them like you would a child in sports. If you see a kid who's, hitting a baseball and he's not doing good at all, and the kid comes to you saying, yeah, what'd you think of it? You're not going to say, man, you suck at baseball. No, you're going to say, why don't you try to, work your back foot into it? Why don't you give them constructive criticism? Tip number 3, if it's fire, buy the merch. Merch is always one of the most important revenue streams for any artist. You may not like the album, but you still love the artist, right? So get a t-shirt. Obviously, don't get the album cover t-shirt, don't get the album paraphernalia on it if you really don't like the project. But if you have the money to burn, get a couple stickers. Get a beanie, get a keychain. There's so many different things artists are selling now. Support them in that fashion. The 4th and last tip I'll give is consider getting concert tickets. Keyword, consider. Now, I'm a huge advocate for people going out to go to concerts. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience for a lot of people. And especially when it's your favorite artist, it's a time that you'll literally never forget. But I'm no fool. Concert tickets are pricey. And so a lot of the times you kind of want it to be the perfect experience for you to go, especially if you're kind of on a budget like me and many people, So remember what I was saying earlier about how you can have an album that's just completely bad, or you can just not necessarily connect with it? This really applies here, because if the album is bad, obviously don't get the concert ticket. You kind of want the artist to learn from the fact that they put out bad material and they can't still make a bunch of revenue off of touring, so don't get the tickets. But if the album still has a lot of good reception from critics, if a lot of your friends still like it and you're just not necessarily feeling it, it might be worth considering getting a ticket for it to go see it live in performance. Because of the fact that at the end of the day, they're still your favorite artist and they're still going to be playing a lot of their previous material. It's not like everybody's going to go to a show, not every artist is going to be performing at a show, and perform all 18, 20 songs off their new project. They're going to play a medley of a lot of different things. A lot of the times, it is that new project, but you're still going to experience everything. And you'll more than likely end up getting a new level of connection with that new project if you're seeing it live. So that's all the tips I really have. I feel like our favorite artists dropping music we don't really like happens way more often than we like to let on. And it's kind of interesting to see how different people navigate it. So I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to see you guys in the comments talking about whether or not you've had this experience. Has your favorite artist dropped something you really don't like, but you found a way to still support it? Have they just turned you off entirely as a fan? I mean, I would love to hear different people's experiences. You know, hit me on YouTube comments or just hit me on social media. And hopefully you might have gotten something from these tips that I threw at you, all right? Other than that, that's all I got. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on social media. The links to my stuff are going to be below, my Twitter and Instagram. Subscribe to my podcast. It's pretty important. Started one. Haven't actually talked about it on my YouTube platform in a minute. So yes, follow me. The Rent Free Podcast. The Rent Free Podcast. It's in the description below. You can find it on all podcast platforms. Check it out. I talk about music pretty regularly. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much. Catch you on the flip side. Peace.